If you want to live longer and healthier and stay sharp, you don't necessarily need the newest supplements, the advanced labs, and the biohacking trends. In fact, the gap between average health experiences and exceptional long-term resilience is often built on some fairly basic strategies. The problem is that simple often feels too simple, and we overlook these strategies. I'm Dr. Kenny, IFM certified functional medicine practitioner, and I help people sift through the noise to help find what actually moves the needle in their health and healing with an evidence-based and root cause lens. If you appreciate longevity discussions like this, go ahead and give the video a like. I'll make more just like it. In this video, we're going to strip back the conversations around longevity to its foundations and talk about some of the things that quietly outperform even the most impressive supplements on the market. I've had patients spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on the latest supplements, anti-aging trends, and biohacking equipment, and yet they don't feel the needle in their health moving very profoundly. And I hear some version of this all the time. I feel like I'm doing everything right, I'm eating well, I'm exercising, my labs look normal, and yet I just don't feel like my best self. And that is obviously quite frustrating and confusing, because if you're putting in the right signals, why isn't your system responding? The piece that often gets missed is subtle but profound. And maybe play this on repeat. Your body doesn't necessarily respond to what you do. It responds to the environment you're in. And if that state of your environment is off, you can stack on all the supplements and advanced technological tools in the world and still feel off. So instead of focusing on what we do, we're going to shift our focus slightly to how your body functions when it comes to longevity. And I don't want this to sound harsh, but many people believe they're doing the basics. But when we start to just collect a little bit of data, it starts to reveal the truth behind the perceived reality. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be tracking everything every day of your life for the end of time. But starting with a bit of data can give your body and your mind feedback when you're attempting to build your own healthy aging or longevity routine. A few days looking at your food, your sleep quality, or other biometric data can go a long way in setting this foundation objectively up for success. The big difference here is really shifting and recognizing the difference between intention and physical objective response. It's a different perspective from, I feel like I'm doing all the right things, to how is my body responding to what I'm doing? And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They may be putting in all of the right inputs, but they're not looking at how those inputs are producing results in their own chemistry. Without that feedback, it is very easy, especially in the longevity and health optimization space, to keep spinning your wheels. So if it's not just about what you're doing, what actually tells the body if those basics are going to work? Like I said previously, it all comes down to the state or environment your body is in. Your body is taking a collection of signals throughout your environment every day and asking one single question. Am I safe enough to repair, restore, and optimize? Or am I more in survival mode? Every input, from your sleep to your food to your environment, your relationships, your political reality, each of these influences the signals that your body is receiving in this manner. I like to frame this with my patients as your cumulative safety signals every given day. These safety signals are what determine your stress chemistry, your hormones, your metabolism, even how your genes express themselves, which becomes incredibly important in the longevity conversations. When these safety signals are consistently in the safe zone, your body shifts into what's called a more anabolic state, or a building state. You can build muscle, you can repair tissues, you can produce more steady energy, and your systems respond accordingly. But when those signals are dominated by stress chemistry, whether we perceive stress or not, the body shifts into a more catabolic state or breakdown state. What this means is that your body has shifted into using its own materials for survival rather than repair. And this is where the disconnect happens. From the outside, and objectively speaking, you could be doing the healthiest and most longevity focused things in the world. But if you're in a catabolic state, the body is not going to know what to do with those supplies in a predictable way. That's why somebody can be eating objectively well or compared to somebody else they're looking at, taking the right supplements, moving more, but not seeing the progress in their health markers, whether or not they are going for health optimization or focused on a chronic condition they have. Because one of the biggest drivers of this shift from that anabolic to catabolic physiology is cortisol. Yes, this is our main stress hormone, and it plays a major role in normal body functions, including waking us up in the morning, your heart rate set point, and so many other bodily functions. But when it stays chronically elevated, such as we see with modern society, these hidden stressors stack up to shift the body into a more catabolic or breakdown state. Essentially, this is diverting resources away from repair and energy creation and good digestion and absorption to just maintaining a certain level of blood sugar balance or other stress chemistry pieces of the puzzle. Perhaps your digestion slows down or your recovery becomes less consistent and your energy starts to drain. Over time, that adds up. Again, the state or the environment often determines the outcome. So if repair mode depends on safety signals, we're going to start with one of the most foundational pieces that matters when we're trying to boost up that rebuild and repair state. Sleep is where your body decides, among many other things, are we in repair mode or are we just trying to get through the night? Because real restorative sleep is actually not passive. It's one of the most active and restorative processes our body goes through, ideally for a third of our life. This is where your brain goes through glymphatic clearance, or your brain's detoxification system. It clears up waste that builds up throughout the day in one of the most metabolically active parts of the body. It's also where your hormones reset in a big way. We see this surge of peptides, but the hormone rhythms are very well established, and it starts with sleep. Your cortisol rhythms are established, growth hormone is secreted, and insulin sensitivity is also recalibrated during sleep. And your nervous system also shifts to a state of rest and repair. Your hormones and your nerves are central to this process and to healthy aging overall. When a patient tells me that they've slept for 7 or 8 hours and they still feel exhausted, I see that as a major clue. Because sleep isn't just about the duration of sleep. It is about getting into that deeper restorative process of sleep. And when it doesn't, you can feel it the next day in a big way. It may look like less energy, perhaps more cravings for sugar or quick bursts of energy, and also poor blood sugar control. This is where the research helps us to anchor this concept of the importance of sleep. A large overview of systematic reviews found that the sweet spot for sleep is right around 8 hours for most people. And that number is associated with better health outcomes across the board. And this is a huge public health piece because data shows that over the last 2 to 3 generations, we Americans have been getting less and less sleep each generation. One of the more obscure symptoms that many of my patients come in experiencing is a general loss of energy or fatigue. And that's an important clue that can tie us into the next important longevity tool. If your sleep sets the stage and the reserves for your energy, blood sugar control sets it for the rest of the day. And this is one of the most common patterns I see, is that people come in thinking they have an energy problem. And so they're pounding the coffee or the energy drinks. And yet really underneath the surface, it's a blood sugar regulation issue. Every time you eat, your blood sugar rises, and that response is normal, but the shape of that response over time is what matters. If it rises quickly and then drops quickly, that represents a certain level of instability. And wearing something like a continuous glucose monitor or CGM can be a very powerful tool to understand how your body responds to blood sugar balance and regulation throughout the day. If it rises and falls quickly like that, one of the most common experiences is energy after you eat for an hour or two, and then you become foggy or moody or less energized. Over time, that pattern becomes a stressor on the system because cortisol will actually counteract the effects of that blood sugar instability. And this is where insulin comes in. Its role is to see blood sugar in the bloodstream and essentially cram it into your cells. It's the signal that determines this process. When your insulin levels stay elevated or on that roller coaster, your body begins to shift its balance when it comes to energy production. It has a much harder time accessing stored energy, especially in the form of fat. That's why blood sugar regulation is such an important part of the body composition conversation as well. So even if you're eating well, you can still feel that low energy if this blood sugar dysregulation is part of your story. And that's because your system is relying on the incoming fuel, or the constant snacking is how that manifests in many people, instead of being able to metabolically switch to burning fat for fuel. And this connects back to what we already talked about with stress chemistry. Because if your body is in a constant stress-driven state, and not just emotionally perceived stress, but stress chemistry at large, this can also promote further blood sugar instability, because cortisol is a master regulator of blood sugar as well, that opposes the effects of insulin. So now you can see these layers and how they start to develop when we talk about a systems-based approach to longevity. Sleep influences the way your body controls blood sugar. Stress also influences blood sugar, and blood sugar feeds back into both of these systems as well. So what is a longevity tool that you can use to help stabilize these systems when it comes to blood sugar control? The strongest source of buffering that happens with blood sugar balance is in your muscle tissue. Most people think of muscle as an area for strength or even aesthetics, but your muscles actually are one of the greatest longevity organs that you can leverage. It acts as a storage and regulation center for blood sugar. When you eat, your muscles help to absorb blood sugar when they have the capacity, and this helps to stabilize your insulin signaling systems and more directly helps to stabilize your energy. But when your muscle mass is low, that buffering capacity drops dramatically. So you could eat the same meal and have two different layers of muscle mass ultimately. One creates a very different insulin and blood sugar spike picture. The other is more stabilized. And the importance of muscle is not just theoretical. A 2022 systematic review and meta-analysis showed that increased muscle tone and resistance training was associated with a lower incidence of all-cause mortality, including cancer and cardiovascular deaths. And that's huge. That shows that muscle is not just about performance, but it is a major longevity and healthy aging organ as well. And if you're one who likes the research, I've put together some of the studies from this particular talk into a free research summary. You can access it in the pinned comment in the description below. So building and maintaining your muscle mass becomes one of the most useful longevity tools that you have in your tool belt. And in many instances, it's free. Resistance training does not require a gym membership or fancy tools. But even with your sleep improving or stabilizing your blood sugar and improving your muscle mass, there's still one thing that can override all of that longevity progress, and that is stress chemistry. Again, not just mental, emotionally perceived stress, but physiological stress. I feel like in our society, we always have to reframe it because there's such a negative connotation when talking about stress. Stress chemistry is something your body doesn't differentiate between the sources that it may be coming from. When your body perceives stress chemistry, it shifts the body into a sympathetic state, or that fight or flight state. You may not perceive it, but oftentimes you do. It's part of the agitation you may feel going about your day. And in that state, your body shifts priorities dramatically. Instead of the repair and restore mode, it goes straight into that survival chemistry mode. So this is where things like your digestion slow down or absorption is influenced. Also, hormone signaling can become less communicated. Also, recovery becomes limited and hormone signaling is less coordinated. And this is where specific patterns start to show up, where you may be eating well but not absorbing properly, or exercising enough and not recovering fully, ultimately the efforts are not showing themselves as progress. This is what a stress chemistry dominant system looks like. And for a lot of people, and especially with our culture and societal conditioning, it doesn't even feel like stress. Maybe it's more, I'm tired and I can't power through my day. Now, here's where this conversation goes even deeper when it comes to the longevity piece. Stress isn't about just what's happening now in this moment in time. It's also about how your systems have adapted throughout your cumulative life exposures of stress. There's a compelling and important body of research around adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And a large meta-analysis found that higher ACE scores correlated with a higher incidence of poor health outcomes across the board. This research is incredibly important because it reminds us that trauma and early childhood experiences that were adverse inform the way our nervous systems and hormone systems developed throughout our life stages. And that matters far beyond the year those traumatic exposures existed. Those patterns influence your nervous system, your stress response, and how well your body repairs over time. So when we talk about safety signals, this is where it becomes quite real. Because if your systems don't feel safe, they will not prioritize healing and especially health optimization. And you may begin to realize differently that these systems are not operating independently. They are deeply interconnected. I use a spider web reference for when you influence one system, the others are going to be drawn along toward that pathway or that intervention. So it's important to honor this complexity, because this is where many people get stuck, is they try the one thing, the diet, the supplement, the newest technology, and they expect it to move mountains across their health experiences. But the body and even your symptoms don't work in these isolated parts. They are deeply interconnected underneath. This is why progress can feel so frustrating or even futile for some people, because you may be addressing one piece with all the intention in the world, but it's not moving the needle in your health or your longevity goals as you would expect. It brings us back to that central conversation we had at the beginning about how intentions and even the inputs themselves may not determine the outcomes. How your body reacts and responds truly does. So let's simplify this with some action steps that we can really anchor into. Not hundreds or even tens of ideas to try, but the foundations: sleep quality and timing, muscle mass and movement, blood sugar stability, and your nervous system environment. These are the safety signals. These are the foundations that determine whether the more finessed longevity interventions you try have more predictable results. Because when the foundations are not in place, your body cannot shift into that repair and optimize mode. It's stuck in fight or flight survival mode. And if you want to take it one step further, it's ideal to ground this in objective data. A simple sleep tracking app, or even tracking your heart rate variability throughout the day, is a single measure that you can leverage to get insight into each of these important foundational systems. Heart rate variability, for instance, is the distance between your two heartbeats. And it shows a lot about the flexibility between that fight or flight part of your nervous system and the rest and digest part of your nervous system. And now that you understand how these basics and these foundations shape some of your longevity decisions, one of the most important themes is still around blood sugar balance and insulin resistance. And in this video here, we do a deeper dive on insulin resistance, fatigue, and energy creation. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.